Thank you for joining ASAP's Art Murmur Introduction to Art Exchange Moving Image. This is the first conversation in a series of four on the cross-cultural curatorial development and exhibition program titled Art Exchange Moving Image. The program supports mid-career visual arts curators from sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, and it was hosted between 2023 and 2025. Before we begin, I would like to introduce Art South Asia Project for those of you who might not be familiar with us and introduce today's panel. My name is Kuhu Kopariha and I have a cold today, so please bear with me. I am the program manager at Art South Asia Project, or ASAP. ASAP is a UK-based not-for-profit established in 2021. We support the infrastructure of modern and contemporary visual and applied arts in South Asia, and we do this by facilitating and expanding networks of collaboration and research. We support through grants and creative collaboration, archiving, research, and publications. We also support professional development through programs like these and workshops, talks, fellowships, etc. For this conversation, we have brought together panelists who have been instrumental in conceiving and managing Art Exchange moving image program. We are delighted to have Benjamin Cook, who is the founder director of LUX and LUX Scotland, Leah McGurk, the relationship manager at visual arts at British Council, Sadia Rahman, head of arts at British Council Bangladesh, and Mala Yamey, program curator at Art South Asia Project. Before we get into questions, uh, I'd like to invite the panelists to say a little bit about themselves and the role that they played in the program. And I'm going to start with Ben.
Thank you, Kuhu. So, as Kuhu said, my name's Benjamin Cook, and my role in the project was, Lux was one of the main partners in the original project. I've since left my role as the director of Lux, and I'm project mentor on the ongoing project at the moment. So, still working on it, and I've been basically involved since the beginning of the project and on the kind of proto versions of the project before this as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but I'll pass over to Leah.
Hello, hi everyone. I'm Leah McGurk. I'm a relationship manager of visual arts at the British Council. I am the programme lead for British Council for the Art Exchange Moving Image project. I've been working closely with Ben, Mala, Kuhu, and colleagues across South Asia, including Sadia, to support this programme. Yes. I think that's all I'm going to say for now. Sadia, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good evening from Dhaka. I'm Sadia Rahman, as Kuhu said. I am head of arts of the arts team in Bangladesh for the British Council. And my role in this project really started, I would say, last year. So I'm probably the most recent participant of everyone who's here speaking today. And like all of the other heads of arts in the regions, our role was when it was put to us that this was a program that had worked beautifully in sub-Saharan Africa, and whether we thought that there was a place or a need for it in the South Asia sector, then there was interest from the UK partner in the UK sector. So we consulted amongst ourselves and we felt that there certainly was a need, and we'd be delighted to have the project and then to operationalize the project in South Asia, in my case, with a focus on Bangladesh, where we then got involved in things. I and my team got involved in things like assessing, reviewing applications, and then supporting projects when they were finally selected and finalized, while Benjamin and also Mala and others were acting as mentors and working on the more creative side of it. Back to you, Kuhu.
Mala, you are yet to introduce.
So I think Ben, Leah, and Sadia have done a very good job of introducing the program. So ASAP and and me and Noor before Kuhu, but now Kuhu's with us, started the conversations with Ben, I think almost 2 years ago now, about coming on as Art South Asia project as a South Asia partner. The previous partner had been Gas Foundation for the Sub-Saharan Africa project. So we came on really to support Lux in the delivery of the project, to use our networks in South Asia to kind of get curators interested in the program, and then co-facilitate their online mentorship sessions, the UK trip, and making the exhibitions happen in their home countries. But as everyone said, we'll continue talking about that as we keep going. But I am a little bit less involved now, and I think Kuhu does a lot more about the project than me now. But it's lovely to be here today.
Thank you, everyone. You guys have touched briefly on this question, but I still want to explore a bit more of why did or how did the program come about, Art Exchange Moving Image, and what was the specific demand in the art space that you were focusing on when you came up or came up with the idea for it? And this question is for Leah and Ben.
Thanks, Kuhu. So I guess to preface, this project works with moving image artworks from the British Council collection, and we have a collection of over 8,500 artworks, including a selection of those which are time-based media and moving image works. And traditionally, the collection was a touring resource. So usually exhibitions were created or packaged using works from the collection, um, and and toured internationally. But in more recent years, we've been thinking about how we could use the collection more as a resource for professional development to and offer an invitation to build exhibitions that speak more to local contexts and invite new perspectives to the collection. And the British Council is a massive organisation and we do a lot of things, but I felt that as a grant making and programme delivery organisation, with a collection, we had a kind of unique opportunity to tie in a curatorial development scheme with funded exhibition making for early career curators. And I guess one of the first things we identified was that for career development for early career curators, that being able to have, I guess, credits of around exhibition making and access to funding was one of those big barriers to curatorial development. We had piloted this program in a previous project called We Are Here, which was a different collaborative project that we ran with Lux. Again, it was a moving image touring program of works from the British Council and Lux's collection. And our colleagues in the Western Balkans proposed a curatorial intensive for a group of curators from the Western Balkans. And I guess that was a sort of pilot for this. And we wondered how we could expand on this process for curators, maybe have a longer, more in-depth process of curatorial intensive, and if it would apply to other regions. And we sort of looked at where a increasing demand for moving image curatorial development and exhibition making might be. And in dialogue with our colleagues in Sub-Saharan Africa, we commissioned some research to sort of look at if this is something that would work and what the demands were. Yeah, I could go into more detail. There's a lot, and and then following the success of that program, we then started looking at other regions where this might work. And I think one thing that really came out was alongside the curatorial development and the capacity building elements of the program, it was the cross-regional dialogue and networking was a real strength of the program, and building cohorts around these regional spaces. Yeah, and we started to develop the program for South Asia. Now I'll hand over to Ben.
Thank you, Leah. Okay, so I suppose, yeah, that was some of the history. Why, the reason why we got involved was I was running LUX, and LUX is an organization that supports and promotes artists working with moving image. And so I think this was doing lots of things, the program. In some ways, there was this interest in animating and engaging with British Council collection. I think there's something very specific about moving image work as well. There is this kind of thing that's happening in the art world in some ways, that I would say, like, moving image is really one of the preeminent expressive forms now. It's almost surprising to not see it in contemporary art exhibitions. It's really ubiquitous. It's really everywhere. And I think we have this kind of challenge in a way that I think practice is almost ahead of our ability to talk about it or to deal with it institutionally in some ways. So I think we're kind of catching up. Well, we've had a few hundred years to work on painting and sculpture and things like that. We've only had 100 or so years to work with moving image, and which still sounds like a lot. And probably in visual arts, it's been less than 50 years. So that's, in the grand scheme of, like, human existence, it's quite a short time, and we're still grappling with that. And I think that's kind of really present. This kind of challenge in, if you go to see exhibitions and things now, there's still this kind of, like, tension in terms of, like, how do you deal with this work? How do you deal with temporal work in spaces that are designed for spatial work? How do you deal with temporal work in spaces that are designed for people to decide what their own time is in terms of engaging with work? How do you engage with work that needs to be shown in dark rooms in spaces that are designed with lots of light and things that have sound and things? So there's some material issues, but also I think what's really interesting about this area is that by meeting those challenges, it brings up these kind of questions for us about, there's something reflexive in this question about exhibition making. It returns us in some ways to some of these fundamental questions around exhibition making, around how we engage with audiences, what these spaces are, what these spaces are for. So there's some of the challenges, and some of the benefits are that, I think why we're seeing so much work in this area is because it's very it is very contemporary. It's very immediate. It very much speaks about the contemporary condition in some ways, this kind of work as well. So I think, and it's very reflective, I think, of the cultural media landscape in which most of us around the world kind of exist. It's so ubiquitous, moving images in the world. They're coming at us all the time. So there's questions around a kind of, like, literacy question in some ways as well. Like, how do we discern these different kinds of images, and how do these images show up in visual arts? So I think it's a very rich area for thinking, not just media, not just about that medium, but just about this whole kind of question of what it means to work with contemporary art in this moment. In some ways, it's like the hard edge of that question. And the other thing I would just say is that there is something in the potentiality of moving image about it. There's something in this work that speaks of networks, of connection, of circulation, things like that as well. Because what we're talking about is fundamentally works that are dematerialized in a world of objects. And so, in a way, the work then becomes very much about the reconjuring of that work, like how to bring it back into the world and how to hold it. And again, that's a really interesting question to attend to curatorially. And also because this project's been very much about kind of exchange and network building. There is something in the quality of this work as well that speaks to that. You know, this like moving image work is fundamentally work that exists in and of the network. You know, it exists and it comes to life in this network and this circulation. So even though I'm a great enthusiast for this kind of work, obviously, I think it's interesting. You know, I think what's valuable in this project as well is that it really is really useful in terms of kind of thinking about this these kind of questions. And the last thing I would say is, I was talking for so long, is that as I said, you know, it's very new and or relatively new, and I think we're still we're still thinking together around curatorship and how these works can exist and inhabit within the institution as well. So again, it brings a really rich area of kind of thinking and possibility. Okay.
Thank you. That's wonderful. It's really interesting to hear about. I guess moving image also allows curators to think in a very experimental way because the work itself is so experimental sometimes. Um, and yeah, it was lovely to hear why moving image, but I also wanted to ask uh, both of you and maybe if Sadia or Marla have a specific reason for this, they can also jump in. Why did you choose South Asia as a region where you wanted to offer these curatorial fellowships?
I can start.
Yeah.
Think one of the elements of this program, I mean, in terms of working in a regional way, because we've worked with this program in the Western Balkans, Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia. One of the big elements of this program is peer mentorship and sort of building sustainable collaborations. And so building a peer network of practitioners working in similar contexts seemed to make sense for a program of this kind, particularly when we're looking at exhibition making and the sort of social, political, physical context people working in and being able to sort of share common challenges. Um, because we do work across global programs where we have cohorts from people all over the world, but we felt that there was sort of shared sort of physical, social and intellectual conditions that meant that working in a specific regional cohorts would really work for this program. And the British Council and ASAP being organisations working across these 5 countries in South Asia meant that we could provide a space for creative exploration and exchange that could work across some of the like administrative barriers to building these networks. Um, and for South Asia specifically, I guess for visual arts, we were thinking about some of the really big growth areas in visual arts, and moving image, and where we could really add value, I think, at this stage. Um, yeah, I feel like maybe Sadia or Mala can speak more specifically to South Asia context because it was sort of, an offer that was shaped depending on where it's being delivered. Yeah.
Sadia, do you want to go, or are you happy for me to jump in quickly?
Mana, I'd be really interested to hear from ASAP's side the interest, but I'm
Yeah.
happy to add a few comments at the end as well.
I think as fundamentally ASAP was set up to kind of celebrate the shared histories across the 5 countries that we identify as South Asia. So I think, and one of the big ideas really that Noor and we discuss quite a lot is how the hope is that ASAP doesn't really need to exist. And so by building the networks, we're building that not solidarity necessarily, but that peer-to-peer mentoring and networks that having a representative from each country, we're kind of letting them go and make their own relationships. I mean, two of the curators we ended up selecting actually already knew each other, but it was a really beautiful way of bringing together practitioners from all 5 countries. And I think as we were shaping the South Asia kind of part, it was super important to us, and it's something we've realized through our own programming that we have to include all 5 countries because of the way that funding is allocated or the way that infrastructure is in. I mean, India is this big monolith that has so much funding internally, and there's so many opportunities within the country or also within external kind of international partnerships. But the other 4 countries don't get the same kind of exposure all the time. So it's like this bringing everyone in and being really insistent on making sure that every single country had a representation was something I think was really like important to us as an organization. So we're really happy that we ended up. I think there was a point because there's, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not a visual arts representative in every single one of these countries. So it was really important, for example, for us to make sure Sri Lanka was included, as otherwise we felt it wasn't a South Asia program, essentially.
Is there time for me to add in a little bit
Yes,
as
of
well?
course. Go for it.
Really interesting comments. And I think that, where the South Asia teams at the British Council, like my team and the teams in the other 5 countries, the other 4 countries in the South Asia region for us, we came to the question of why South Asia as a region rather than us opting in or opting out as individual countries. So we might, I mean, we don't have to talk about the operational or delightful operational details of how we decide to do programs and how countries decide or how regions decide, but we can if there's interest. But one of the elements is at British Council, we do lots of programs that some countries in a region, excuse me, opt into and others don't. And we have some programs that are offered to every country that the British Council works in. And we have some programs like this one where I wouldn't say it was designed around South Asia because we've heard that it wasn't, but it was a regional offer. We decided that it was going to be a regional offer. And I don't want to speak on behalf of my colleagues in the other countries, but we did discuss it. And I think we saw the advantages of it being a regional offer. And so that we knew that we were all going to have to find a place for it in our planning, or we might wait another year or something, to make it make sense for us. Excuse me. And I think a number of the points that we considered, although we're coming at it from a different perspective, have been touched on already. For example, I took notes when Ben was speaking in response to the earlier question that in many ways moving image practice is ahead. The practice itself is ahead of the ways in which we're talking about it. Institutions talk about it, arts institutions talk about it, and other cultural practitioners who are not perhaps making art, but who are writing about it, thinking about it, trying to put a language around it. And that's very much the case, I think, in all of the South Asian countries, although for different reasons. And there's both the side of there being very exploratory, inquisitive, and affective contemporary practices by young practitioners. There's also the element that certainly we feel in Bangladesh, and I think this is shared in many parts of all of the countries in the region, particularly outside of the metropoles, is that often there might be a practice that's well documented and well written about, but it might be written about in English and it may be shown by curators overseas. And because the language or the discourse in which the language is framed is not familiar to viewers here or practitioners here, it doesn't quite connect. So that opportunity to look at it, not just as a professional development opportunity and an opportunity to internationalize, but to think about it in context of the viewing culture and the media reading culture in which we're inculcated into film in this region, which is a little bit different. And of course, there's the literal language element of what is the what are the languages in which information is made available to audiences, in a literal sense, which is also very important. But there's another layer when we talk about discourse, which of course the viewing culture is different. And so the way in which local films or foreign films are approached and how people try to understand them through their existing references is quite different. But of course, South Asia also has an incredibly rich moving image culture. And it's a huge industry as well. So it's really familiar to people. But there's also this, I don't want to say alienation, but there are these significant points of distance. And just to share a few examples that hopefully will resonate with members of the audience. So, for example, CAMP, the Indian media collective, who, 2007, I guess now I feel like they're very recent, but when we do the maths, they're not really that recent. They've been around for a while. They've never been shown in Bangladesh. As far as I've known, their work's never been shown in South Asia, outside of India. And for a different a Bengali example across the border, Ritik Ghatak, he's an incredibly famous filmmaker internationally, and of course particularly famous in Bengal because he's Bengali and also he's from Rajshahi in Bangladesh. But I think in the last 15 years, no one's organized a screening of his films in Bangladesh. And if they do, our infrastructure doesn't have a way of connecting to Film Heritage Foundation and the prints that were restored and digitized by 2018. But Film at Lincoln Center did a huge retrospective of Ritik Ghatak's films in 2019. And again, there were Indian academics who wrote beautiful essays on occasion and introduced the film. And I think Naeem Mohaimin introduced one of the films. So we have this, to summarize, because I've been talking for ages, but there's a very rich cinema making and also moving image making and viewing culture in South Asia. But just as Ben was saying when he was reflecting on the UK context, institutions and practitioners are very behind in the language and the mode of presenting it for audiences or making it available for audiences. And so audiences are limited in having access, and there are multiple layers to what limit the access. And this program seemed to be addressing, although on a small scale, because we did have one delegate from each country, but hopefully because the British Council works in the long term, that's something that we can address over time rather than doing a short-term, very huge program. But addressing access to collections, having material that people can reflect on and connect to and connect back to their own viewing cultures, some professional development, peer-to-peer networking, mentoring, also crucially the opportunity to make an exhibition and explore it both thematically as a medium, in context of audience, technically, and to think about temporal art at a number of levels over a period of months in the year with a support structure. We felt it was a very sort of pertinent and useful model. So that's useful to us, but we're also interested, I think, in supporting models that may trigger other institutions to replicate them or do a version of their own, which would be very interesting to us as well. So I think from South Asia, as in being, being the operational teams or the assessing teams, who come in at the last stages after a lot of the ideation is done. These were some of the reasons that we considered for why South Asia should want to be involved, rather than individual countries only. Thank you for the time.
No, of course. Thank you, Sadia. I mean, it definitely makes sense to me. I used to work in India, and it is even in India where I think that these screenings happen, there is you go to these things and you realize over a period of time that the rooms are small. Like there's only a certain type of people who are invited and who get the information to come to these events. So there is even in that space, there is a language divide, and we're plagued with too many languages, which is good and also leads to this kind of exclusionary uh, programming. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask Mala about ASAP's involvement a little bit, and what has ASAP's role been in facilitating this program?
Thanks, Kuhu. I might need your help on the more recent stuff, but I'll start. So actually, you guys have heard Ben speak, so he's a very great person to learn from. And actually, our conversation or kind of collaboration started when I did my master's, which was I did a graduate project at the RCA with Ben at LUX. And I think as I was finishing the graduate project, I started at ASAP and I was telling Ben all about Art South Asia project. And I think it's probably a similar time that the Sub-Saharan African project was starting or was in the works. And when he was ideating and British Council were ideating about the South Asia partner, Ben came to us based on the relationship, which was a really lovely continuation. Speaking of peer-to-peer learning and mentorship from my master's to this program. And we, yeah, as I've briefly mentioned, we've from there got involved in helping with the open call, really sending out to all of our networks. I know Kuhu said it briefly, but we're a grant giving organization as well as a programs organization, or program delivery, as Leah said. I think the way Leah articulated it was great. So we've worked with lots and lots of individuals and organizations across all 5 countries. And so one of the things that's really important to us, which I know is just as important to the British Council, is legacy of the people who we've supported through grants and programs. So what we did was, once we started the conversations and started promoting the open call, was to go to each of our kind of previous grantee organizations, previous program partners, and to ask them to share it, but also to think of if there are individuals within those organizations who we thought would be brilliant at this. We really encouraged them to apply. So, for example, Sandev is a really good example because we supported the Museum of Modern Contemporary Art Sri Lanka which is his senior curator there, with their first publication on Minette de Silva. And so we'd worked a lot with Sandev, and actually he'd come on an Art Murmur after the grant. So when this came out, we really, really encouraged Sandev to apply. So it was really, really lovely to see that kind of continuation of our belief in legacy. But the other thing that felt really right for us is, obviously we're coming up to our 5th year next year, but we're a very new organization. So we started with grants, and then before Lux and British Council came to us, we'd actually run our first curatorial fellowship in partnership with Serendipity Arts Foundation. So that was in December 2020. I think. So we supported one young curator who actually ended up working with quite a few moving image works from the UK diaspora to put on an exhibition at Serendipity Arts Festival in December 2023. So we'd started this kind of mentoring and curatorial development programs. So when Art Exchange Moving Image came to us, we were so excited because one of the limitations, and I won't go into the politics of working with an Indian-based partner, is that we actually couldn't offer this or offer our programs to every single diaspora or every single region because of, as we all know, visa limitations. So this program really offered us that opportunity to work with every single country. So after the open call, and I'm probably talking too much and I'm sure we'll go into this, we were involved in selecting it and helping Ben and the British Council, well, Lux and the British Council, to start the relationships with the curators. And we really enjoyed organising this wonderful London residential week with Ben and the British Council, where as we know about visa restrictions, a lot of curators or individuals from South Asia are unable to meet on home turf. So there are only 2 countries where they can meet, which is Sri Lanka and Nepal. So it was really exciting to bring them to London to have them all be in person. And it's something that we're implementing in our current program with Asia Art Archive. It was really nice for it to be in the middle of the program. So they'd had the online kind of sessions, so got to know each other vaguely, and then they met kind of in the middle of the program, and now they're delivering their exhibitions, but they've still got that relationship. So I think that was a really lovely week to organize. And I think we've now just been mentoring alongside Ben, the curators to deliver their exhibitions, helping them with their communications and PR of their exhibitions, and running this wonderful Art Murmur series. But I know you've got another question later about legacy, so I won't talk anymore. But Kuhu, if there's anything you want to add about ASAP's involvement, please do.
No, I think you did a great job at excellent speed. So, um, I think I'm gonna move on to my next question, which is for Leah and Sadia. When we were in designing this talk, I think that we were discussing that people are really interested in partnering with British Council, and we wanted you guys to elaborate a little bit about the programming at British Council and perhaps what are the different approaches uh, for the UK team and for the regional offices. I know it's a broad question, but
Leah, would you like to start off?
Sure. I think just to preface, say we work in a massive organization that does many, many different things. So we're the UK's Organisation for Cultural Relations, and we do this through arts and culture programs and through educational opportunities. We're based in over 100 countries. So there are many different ways, and we work through and with partners in all aspects of our work. So programs happen in many different ways, either from uh, something that comes up through research or from partners, or proposals, whether we put out open calls or if it's something responding to something specific in country. I work in an art form team, so it can come through uh, in many, many different ways, but always in response to sort of sector needs um, in both UK and in the countries and regions that we're working in. And we work across, I guess, broad themes, which is around sort of connecting the UK and global art sectors. If we're talking about art specific, I'm not going to talk about everything else, but sort of internationalizing and building connections, um, championing, the international creative economy, and building a global community of change makers, and then also to support artists and cultural practitioners, and creative organizations to respond to social and environmental issues, and that's our sort of culture response program. Um, and then how we deliver that is through, I guess there are main types of programs that we do. So professional development programs, I would say this one falls under, but also grant making, delegation visits, convening, also commissioning research and doing policy advocacy. So yeah, I guess by looking at sector needs, we then look at the different types of things we do, and how they fit within those themes and build a program around it. And it can happen in so many ways. Um, but yeah, that's the sort of the broad strokes.
No, that's exactly right, Leah. It can happen, and there are so many permutations of ways in which programs can come together at British Council. I think within the British Council, I've joined relatively recently. I think I'm just into my 18th month with the organization. I find it, hugely useful to have all of these different options and approaches to think about how to respond to sector needs, or needs in different areas of the sector as we're picking it up. And also just to reflect on one part of Kuhu's question about UK teams and regional teams. In general, I mean, although we have offices in different countries and we do have teams called a South Asia region team, each region has a team or a cluster function, but that's usually administrative and there's cells of expertise in particular areas. But really, we're all kind of one team. So I work in the arts team, but I'm based in Bangladesh and I have specific responsibilities related to Bangladesh, or they expect specific professional expertise from me about understanding of the Bangladesh sector and how it's connected to the UK sector. But then I'm also expected to have some understanding of the UK sector as well. So really our teams work all together. Leah is in a visual arts team. Leah used the term art form. So the British Council has, I think, 7, I always get the number wrong, 7 art form teams. So we have visual arts, we have film and creative technology, we have music, theatre and dance, architecture, design, fashion, literature. I'm still missing something. So we have the gamut. So we have art form expertise teams. And we also, as Leah said, have ways of working that involve certain thematic areas. So focusing particularly on delivering how to increase connectivity between art sectors in all of the more than 100 countries that British Council works in and UK sectors. And sometimes the momentum for that comes from sector members themselves or institutions themselves who may come to Leah and say, excuse me, there's, we don't know enough about Bangladesh, for example, or another country in South Asia, but we've heard that there's an amazing festival happening. That could be a really interesting convening point. Could the British Council support a mobility award? We don't call them that, but, or something like that. And because Leah and her team members are very connected with the UK sector, when they realize that there's enough of a need, then they would contact us and see whether something could be done and whether there's a reciprocal interest, and whether we understand based on our understanding, or whether we can commission some research to really do some mapping. So sometimes it comes from entirely outside of the British Council, and then we go through a design process. Sometimes there are things that from our own experience we can make an informed assessment from the British Council experience of what's needed, and that might come from pre-existing programs or a number of other things. So it really runs the gamut, and we generally work together. So I think we don't have situations where I will say there's something that's very specifically relevant and important for Bangladesh, and there's a very specific part of the UK sector that I'm quite sure would intersect with it. And so I'm going to do a visual arts program that connects this. I wouldn't do that without contacting Leah's team, and probably contacting a number of other colleagues, so that we can design it well. And also so that we don't get tunnel vision, because I may be aware of a specific sector need in Bangladesh and a specific group of practitioners in the UK, but it may be more generalized. And so we may be able to make the design more robust. And one of the starting points that we have is to tap into our colleagues in our huge organization, and we consult with them. So we really work, I would say, or certainly my experience has been that it's much more a coalition. And that ideas and momentum can come from different parts of the coalition, and we're quite open in that way, I think. And then once ideas have been generated and pinned down and cases are pinned down, then it goes through the organizational process of making sure that it's been done with enough rigor, and that it's inclusive and it's servicing a need, and we understand what outcomes we want to deliver, and that they match with the outcomes that our sector stakeholders want. So then it goes through a process, but it can happen in all of the ways that Leah listed and different permutations of them.
I'd just add to that something that you said, Sadia. I would say one thing that's really important is that the programs that we do are really grounded in mutuality and consensus. So yeah, as Sadia said, it's not sort of we think you should be doing this, do it, or vice versa, or we're just going to go ahead. But it's really it's a very generative and iterative process. of trying to work out programs that make sense, and work and have mutual benefit, for all the parties involved. Yeah, and yeah, and also and rooted in evidence, I think, research is very important as well. So it's also not just, we're responding to sort of evidence demand, um, cons consultation with sectors, looking at data, yeah, to try and work out how best to serve all our many contexts, sectors, locations, yeah, all the things.
Thank you. That was uh, very detailed and educational, even for me, actually. So thank you. That was lovely. And just to bring it back to the program again, this question is for everyone, and maybe we can start with Ben, since he hasn't really spoken for a while. The question is about we've discussed like the challenges that have led to this program happening, with everybody partnering and collaborating for it. But what are the advantages that you see that this program offers to its fellows, and what are the key learnings that you've taken as people who were involved in managing it?
Thank you, Kuhu. But I think, I mean, I think there's some obvious benefits of just like space and time and the kind of intentionality of the program in some ways. So that's been really brilliant that the British Council have been able to, really what I really appreciate about this program is that kind of openness and the kind of generative nature of it in some ways as well. It hasn't been, and it's, we've been able to be very responsive, and British Council has been very responsive to this as well, because I think this is one of the things that what I very much appreciate about the process is kind of thinking together, and that's how I feel that I work with the cohort as well. There's not a kind of process of me like teaching people things. It's more about facilitating our co-learning. And I really appreciated what Sadia said earlier about there's lots of distinct cultures already, particularly around moving image. Actually, in South Asia, one of the things they say is like, actually, it's the home of artist moving image. It has a very rich and deep history. It might be called different things, and it might appear in different places. We call it something in the UK. It manifests in lots of different places, but actually has a deep and rich history, even in this area of practice. So so it's very important, to honor that as well. In some ways, the challenge is about making those things visible, finding a kind of a shared language around it. And also, as Sadia said, the challenge is so much about kind of access. I mean, in art anyway, it's this challenge of like, if you're interested in things, how can you see it? How can you find out about it? And particularly the challenge of working with work that is not there unless it's actually there and being shown, and then it's particularly challenging. It's very difficult to kind of encounter it or to find it. So again, all of those. So I think that opportunity to think together has been really, and actually we have an extraordinary cohort of participants in the program. The curators are all very like extraordinary people in their own right, and so it's a privilege to kind of work and think with the group, and to facilitate that kind of shared learning is really important. And like I said earlier, this, in some ways, this area of practice is generative in its own right. We're talking about an area of practice that's technologically determined. In some ways, it's changing all the time by its very nature. We're beholden to technology companies, and in terms of the preservation of this work, but the forward exhibition of it as well. So we're in constant flux in some ways, and that's what's exciting about it as well. So to have this opportunity to explore and think together and learn from each other has been really wonderful. What was the other part of your question? So that was like the benefits.
Uh, yeah, it was just about advantages, and the last part was key learnings that you've taken
Oh
with
yeah.
the
So,
program.
so the so I suppose the key learnings are it's complicated. Doing this kind of work isn't, and it is kind of challenging, and and in some ways we're still thinking about that together. What does it mean? What does it mean to show this kind of works? How do you engage audiences? I've learned a lot from the cohort myself in terms of this thinking. It is, and as I said earlier, in some ways it reflexively raises a lot of these kind of questions that we then have to kind of attend to. Yeah, like how do you engage with audiences? How do you deal with the kind of technology issues? How do you deal with all of those material issues that I was talking about earlier, about bringing this work, honoring this work in spaces that aren't built for this kind of work necessarily. um so and then you know there is this kind of issue about like information and discourse and things like this. In some ways we have this kind of sense nowadays that everything is available, that because of the internet everything's available, but it's not. That's like it's not, it's very inaccessible. And again, Sadia's point about camp, for example, is a well-made point. I was surprised to hear that. But these things that see, even when I'm talking about this work that has this potential to circulate so freely in the world, it doesn't, because of that end question of, like, you can't just hang it on the wall. You have to really frame it. You have to really kind of manifest it. And so we have to kind of attend to those challenges. And I think that thinking we're doing together is like thinking for the whole sector and for the whole world in terms of how do we deal with this, because this area of practice is not going away. It's not going away. It's present. It's with us. I mean, now there is a deep history of 50 years history, and if anybody that's involved with art school and things like that will know that it's like people are producing. Young artists are really engaged with it as well. So these are really kind of crucial questions for the future of contemporary art.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Uh, yeah, I agree. I've only been part of the project for 3, 4 months, but even in that short time, having the privilege of attending the sessions that you moderate, Ben, is a learning because of all of the different perspectives to one reading that everybody brings, and it's really wonderful. Uh, I There is a question in the chat, but if anybody else wanted to react to this question before I move on.
I think it's hard to, I think, Ben, you speak as we're always learning when we're listening to you. But I do really want to like concur and say, I think with this cohort, and I'm sure with Sub-Saharan Africa cohort as well, is really been learning with and from them. It's really like the cohort's brilliant. All the ideas they've put forward in both their online sessions and when we met them in person and through the exhibitions are just really, really phenomenal. So I think, and it's something that we as ASAP have like very luckily got to go on the ground. And I think just understanding there is so much rich knowledge that all these curators and have to offer. And I think even just the conversations they had with curators in the UK, it's just showing how much knowledge there is and how much should be raised up and given equal kind of status globally. And I think this program kind of aims to do that. But yeah, I'm rambling. But anyway, I think it's a really great program, and it's been really fun to work on.
No, that wasn't rambling at all. That was, yeah, really succinct, I would say. Uh, okay, I'm gonna just take this question in the chat just because I'm also cognizant of the time. Are there any this is a question from Wendy De Silva. Are there any plans to make the moving image accessible to your audience? Example, a British Council film archive. So I think that uh, it means the audience for this art exchange program, which maybe we can elaborate.
Yeah, it would be good to clarify what you mean by our audience. Yeah.
I can come in and say what I mean by your audience. Now, actually, I wanted to say I did get to see the Minette de Silva film when you showed it at the V&A, and I thought it was brilliant that it came to England as well. And I think your audience is the five South Asian nations and the diasporas of those nations, which are international. And so, and anybody else who's interested. I mean, as an architect, I know a lot of architects were very interested in Minette de Silva's methodologies as much as her work. So what I'm really thinking is I would quite like to point various interested researchers and other parties to that film, but I have no idea how to access it. And I'm wondering whether there might be some kind of pointers to where you might be able to get to these films, whether behind a paywall or otherwise, because I think it'd be a really useful resource.
Thank you. Who would like to take this?
I'm just going to say I don't know exactly which film you're talking about. Is it a film that's in the British Council collection?
No, I don't think so, but you supported the making of a film about an architect in Sri Lanka, Minette de Silva.
Yes.
I know a little bit about it. So, Minette Silva is a very, although very few of her projects still exist, she's one of Sri Lanka's few female, in fact, one of South Asia's few female modernist architects, who was working very much in the mid-century, and in Colombo last year, there was a large exhibition that looked at a particular social housing project that she'd been commissioned to do by the Sri Lankan government. And that was a large exhibition put together by the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Sri Lanka at their temporary premises in Colombo 3. And there are a number of really beautiful elements of the show, including a publication. And one of the elements was a film that involved interview, it involved sort of direct animation and drawing, and the British Council supported that and supported other elements of the show as well through its research and its development. And the film being film, it traveled. So it was sort of not exactly a documentary, but it was factual. It was sort of non-fiction, and it was looking at Minette de Silva's practice, particularly for the, I will pronounce the name wrong, so I shan't try to say it, but I can drop the link in the chat later. But particularly in context of that housing project, which was the focus of the show. And we supported
Watercooler housing.
Watercooler. Yes, exactly. I
Housing.
don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah, I should, because I saw the show twice. But
Yeah.
anyway.
I think Wendy, it's probably worth, that film won't be in the British Council, but I think it's worth contacting the museum in terms of
Yes, I think there was a show actually curated by Sandev, who
Sundays and
is
Sharmini. Yeah.
with Sharmini.
Yeah, I think my point really is that you've done a lot, and I'm just saying this is all going to be potentially just of this moment, unless there's a way of capturing and signposting.
Right. Well, if I may reflect, and I think I'll also pass to Leah, maybe there are a few interesting things that we can talk about with respect to film and moving image that British Council can facilitate access to. So in context of this program, one thing that Leah's already mentioned, as have Ben and Mala, are that a key component of the program was giving curators access to the British Council art collection, which is significant in scale and has holdings of moving image works. So instead of orienting curators towards all of the different potential types of work in the art collection, this program is built around moving image work. So I suppose we could, and I'm sure we would be interested in, if there was interest from partners and also artists and institutions, to find more ways to open up ways for curators and institutions to access the British Council collection. And I don't want to say too much about it because that is really something that Leah works with and understands really well, but it should be something that's for everyone. And it's something that British Council wants to be for everyone, and that's the intention of it. But in order to make it accessible, because we're not an exhibiting organization, we do need to have people who are willing, have an interest in putting the time in to make it available. And another way in which the British Council can work to make film accessible, specifically film, it's a different team to the team Leah's with. We have a film and creative technology team, and they work with the Grierson Trust, they work with BAFTA, they work with BFI, and every year they're creating digital touring packages that are available for screening programs internationally. The British Council offices are able to screen them if we want, but we're also able to work with artists and curators or institutions to find ways to have those films or those packages shown in other places. And further to that, we are here to try to facilitate other kinds of ways or ways of showing other films as well. Yeah, so people we hope will come to us. I mean, maybe this webinar will help practitioners in South Asia to feel that they can come to us to ask whether there's something that can be done. But as I noted earlier, we're not an exhibiting organization, so there are some ways in which we're not always able to implement it, but we're certainly able to facilitate and support and guide, and also provide guidance on things like making sure that things are done in an inclusive manner, making sure that artists and others are paid properly, and to support organizations to work through policies or ways of working that may be new to them because they're small or they are lacking in resources. But Leah, would you like to chime in to speak specifically about the British Council collection a bit?
Yeah, I was just getting the link to post in the chat actually. So I think the specific project you're talking about wasn't one that was commissioned or sits within the British Council's archive. So that's not, I think we supported the wider project, the exhibition. So yeah, we don't hold that work. But in terms of our collection, I can share the link in the chat and we have a database of all the works in our collection, which is accessible to anyone. And then we are a research collection, we're a public collection. So anyone who wants to interact further with the works in our collection, particularly the moving image, it's not all freely available to just access those works online. It is by request, but it is, we don't have many restrictions on sharing it with people who are interested for research purposes. Obviously, if you want to exhibit, loan, show the works, that's a different process. But yes, if for anyone who is interested in researching the works in our collection, that is very much an option.
Thank you. I would just like to add that for the Art Exchange Moving Image program in particular, there is access comes in the way that the culminative project of the Art Exchange Moving Image program is that every curator presents an exhibition, and they load one work from the correct me if I'm wrong, from the British Council
Yeah.
Visual Arts collection. And so that's a way that access comes into play to the audiences in the region, that they get to see a work from the collection in person in different parts of South Asia. And in the show itself, there are also regional artists who the curators are working with, who they showcase. And some of the exhibitions we've been recently going through, two of our curators have already culminated their exhibition. So we've been reflecting on, I mean, they've been sharing their reflections on the exhibition with us. And for the legacy of the program, which ASAP takes very uh, thinks is a very important part of all of the grants and projects that it does. We are thinking about what we can do to have the learnings from this program live on our site so that we have ASAP papers that we will do out of these exhibitions. Uh, this series is one of the ways that we want people to know about this project. And hopefully a lot of the curators are also thinking about exhibition catalogs. So that is, I think, for posterity, but also for having a document of what we've been able to achieve. Uh, yeah, anybody, thank you for putting everything in the chat, guys. I think that's our only question, and we can wrap it up. Thank you so much for all for such a lovely conversation. I had a lot of fun. Uh, I know Sadia, it's quite late for you, so thank you so much for joining. Uh, Mala, you want to say something?
No, I just put something in the chat, and I know that Ben and us we're working on updating, but the Art Moving Image website is also a legacy page for both programs in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. So that's a good point of looking. But thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. This has been really lovely, and thanks everyone for joining us. Again, this talk will be on YouTube for everybody who couldn't make it. Uh, yeah, see you on the next one. Oh, the next talk, actually, I should promote. The next talk is on the 10th of October, and it will be a conversation between Ben and one of the moving image practitioners from Bangladesh, Naeem Mohammed. And we're very excited for that. It will be at 1 p.m. British Standard Time. So, yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks,
bye.
Kuhu.
Bye.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.